Okay, so, at the very center of the BlazBlue universe is a thing known as the Azure, which is a mysterious force that can grant the wishes of anyone who obtains it. The Azure exists within a space called the Boundary, which is a parallel dimension that governs everything that exists. Also present within the Boundary is a group of 3 gods known as the Sankishin, who hold an immense amount of power over time and shit. The first and most powerful god is the Amaterasu unit, whose main power is what's called phenomenon intervention, which is basically the ability to retcon reality. The second god is the Tsukuyomi unit, which is a giant impenetrable shield, and the third is the Susanoo unit, which is a suit of armor that grants the user tremendous strength. The Sankishin usually just kinda sit there, but one day the Susanoo unit got really bored, so its soul split off from itself and became a guy named Yuki Terumi, while the armor was simply left behind. Time passes and humanity discovers the Susanoo unit, the Amaterasu unit, and the first ever shield gate, also known as a hellspring, sometimes called a gate of judgment, but most of the time referred to as a cauldron, which is a gateway into the Boundary, and to humanity, the key to obtaining godhood. In order to access the powers of the Amaterasu unit, humanity developed the Prime Field devices, which are artificial humans that can access the Boundary, one of which, called the Origin, succeeds in obtaining such power. However, the Prime Field devices also became self-aware, which caused humanity to shit themselves and declare war on the Prime Field devices that they created. Great work, guys. Meanwhile, some guy managed to get his hands on a small piece of the Azure's immense power, which allowed for a single wish of his to be granted. So he thought to himself, what could one man possibly want more than anything? That's right, vampires. So the mysterious man wished Clavis Alucard into existence. The war culminates into humans unleashing the first ever black beast upon the world, an uncontrollable creature that devours everything it sees. There's a whole plan behind doing this, but it doesn't matter because the Origin sees that things have gotten a little out of hand, so she uses phenomenon intervention to replace this old fucked up world with a new one, and thus the world of BlazBlue was born. An unspecified amount of time passes, and we turn our attention to 2 baller scientists, Shuichiro Ayatsuki and Relius Clover, who are working with Yuki Terumi to create a sword that can kill Amaterasu called the Kusanagi. To be clear, that's a bad thing. Killing Amaterasu basically means ending the entire world, but apparently no one cares because Relius begins working on the project anyway, while Shuichiro works on a side project known as Kushinada's Linchpin in the event that some horrible disaster occurs as a result of their research. A horrible disaster occurs as a result of their research when the final experiment to create Kusanagi failed miserably and produced a black beast from the cauldron. This is getting ridiculous, guys. The appearance of the black beast ushers in a new conflict known as the Dark War as it begins its rampage across the country of Japan. World leaders are looking at this all like, oh shit, that's not good. So their solution is to nuke the entirety of Japan. Am I reading the right script? How the fuck does this keep happening? The only thing worse than that is that it accomplished literally nothing. They blew up Japan for no reason. Anyways, about 6 or so years into the war, most survivors escaped to the Magister city of Ishana, home to the leading researchers of magic. There we are introduced to local amnesiac Kazuma Kaval, who is searching for the Azure to get his memories back. In pursuit of this, he tells one of his classmates, Celica A. Mercury, to escape from Ishana because her father, Shuichiro Ayatsuki, may still be alive in Japan. He then finds a secret cauldron that emitted so much crazy knowledge that he discovers he's not an amnesiac, but an artificial human created by Relius to serve as a vessel for Yuki Terumi. Meanwhile, Celica is rushing towards Japan to find her father. Now, we're going to skip ahead and come back to this later, you'll see why in a bit, but to summarize, the Black Beast mysteriously decided to take a nap for a year while the humans developed Ars Magus and the Nox Nectoris, which a group of legendary fighters known as the 6 Heroes used to defeat the Black Beast and finally put an end to the era known as the Dark War. Many years passed, and a new organization called the Novus Orbis Librarium, abbreviated as the NOL, began acting as the world government and established the 23 hierarchical cities. Unfortunately, the NOL perpetuated an ever-widening socioeconomic gap and racism, which prompted 6 hierarchical cities to band together and declare independence from the NOL, calling themselves the Ikaruga Federation. Reminder, BlazBlue was a fighting game. Unsurprisingly, the NOL was not a big fan of this maneuver, and put their troops in motion to suppress the Federation, having their main target as Ikaruga's leader, Tenjo Amanohokosaka, and thus igniting the Ikaruga Civil War. Meanwhile, 3 children named Ragna, Jin, and Saya are peacefully living at a church until that dickhead Terumi shows up and ruins everything. Jin is given an evil magic sword which causes him to burn down the church and chop Ragna's arm off, all the while Terumi kidnaps Saya. Ragna is bleeding out when Rachel Alucard, the daughter of Clavis Alucard, saves him by giving him a weapon called the Azure Grimoire. From there, Saya would be taken to a lab and cloned into 3 more Prime Field devices, one of which would go on to become Noel Vermilion after said lab got vaporized. Jin was adopted into the Kisaragi family and would later become a lieutenant for the NOL. He decided fuck the Ikaruga Civil War, so he confronted Tenjo Amanohokosaka by himself and killed her, single-handedly ending the war. This brings us to the events of the very first BlazBlue video game. Yes, that's right, everything up to this point was just backstory from the light novels and some flashbacks from the games, much of which wasn't originally told in chronological order until I organized it for this video. Anyways, can we please talk about the games now? Starting with BlazBlue Calamitytrigger, which takes place around a year after the war. The NOL places a massive bounty on some guy named Ragna the Blood Edge, nicknamed the Grim Reaper, who has been destroying cauldrons across the different NOL branches, with his next objective being the 13th hierarchical city of Kagutsuchi. On his way to the cauldron, he faces off against Hakumen, the current wielder of the Susanoo unit. Hakumen was one of the 6 heroes during the Dark War, and since then he was apparently floating adrift in the boundary for reasons until he was retrieved and brought to this current time by a genius catgirl scientist named Kokanoe. Why? Ragna barely defeats Hakumen and continues until he finds a prime field device called New 13, who says some weird ass shit.
Killings for people. You get broken.
Oh, Ragna, I love it when you talk dirty.
Anyways, New stabs Ragna straight through the torso and drags him into the cauldron, killing both of them instantly. Yeah, no, just kidding, because this, my friends, is the beginning of something called the looping world. See, every time Ragna dies, the world would reset back to the beginning of the Dark War and continue until Ragna dies to New 13 again. Also, when New and Ragna die, they fuse into a black beast, because apparently creating the world's most destructive force is surprisingly easy. That black beast would then be sent back in time about 100 years ago to relation Shuichido's failed experiment to raise hell in the Dark War. Time looped from the Dark War to Calamitytrigger at least 725 times. Before Noel Vermilion watches Ragna get dragged into the cauldron and saves him at the last second, ending the looping world. Enter the Takamagahara system, a program of AIs created to destroy the world, kill Amaterasu, and obtain the Azure so that they can serve as the god of the BlazBlue world. Long story short, Ragna's survival hinders their objective, so Takamagahara launches this thing called Take Mikazuchi, which is set to fire a giant laser upon Kagutsuchi in an attempt to kill Ragna. Hot take? That's a little overkill. Fortunately, Rachel Alucard deploys the Tsukiyomi unit to prevent Ragna's death from happening, sacrificing most of her powers in the process. This begins the events of BlazBlue Continuum Shift, where we see Terumi make another push to finally create the Kusanagi. He is inhabiting a new vessel named Hazuma, not to be confused with Kazuma. That kid sucked and died a long time ago. No, Hazuma is a different dude who is posing as the captain of the NOL Intelligence Department. Okay, Hazuma's actually been around for a while, but I mean... Noelle also happens to have new powers, the details of which are abstract and not important, but she has no idea how to control them, which fucks with the timeline to where every possibility ever is happening simultaneously and interchangeably, which is being taken advantage of by Takamagahara to further their objective towards Doomsday. After a lot of shenanigans, Noelle realizes that Hazuma is up to no good, so she makes her way to the top of Kagutsuchi, where Hazuma reveals to her that she is, in fact, a robot and no one likes her. This makes her have an existential crisis, which causes her to ascend into this biblically accurate angel-looking thing and transform into Mu-12, the Kusanagi. Meanwhile, Ragna finds his way to the top of Kagutsuchi to face off against Hazuma/Terumi. After a lot of yapping, the Kusanagi announces that the world sucks and needs to die, so she heads down to the underground cauldron to fight Jin Kisaragi, kill Amaterasu, and destroy the world. Terumi moves in to kill Ragna, but suddenly another prime field device called Lambda 11 swoops in out of nowhere and sacrifices herself to save Ragna. For some reason, I don't know why she did that. It's a good thing she did though, because she grants Ragna an immense power boost called the Idea Engine, which allows him to defeat Terumi. For now, Ragna then heads down to the underground cauldron to find Jin Kisaragi battling Mu-12. Jin's all like, step aside, I got this. Nice throw! So Ragna tags in and inverts the Idea Engine to reverse the smelting of Mu-12, bringing back Noel Vermilion and returning the world to normal. For now, directly afterwards, Hazuma destroys the Takamagahara system, and the new Imperator of the NOL unveils herself for the first time as Hades Izanami, who is the person behind all of the corruption in the NOL so that she can kill the entire world. These people need new hobbies. This brings us to the events of BlazBlue Chronophantasma, where Ragna heads for Ikaraga to search for a peculiar device known as Kushinada's linchpin, a device that basically stops magic from working, which could potentially help Ragna kill Izanami. Ragna meets with this girl, then that guy, then this thing, then gets injured very badly, but none of that actually happened because phenomenon intervention, except for Ragna being injured, that part was real. He meets Celica A. Mercury for the first time, but gets really confused that she seems to know who he is, so he just sorta dips out of there. Wait a second, wasn't Celica from the Dark War? Yes, the Celica we see here is an exact copy of her existence from nearly 100 years ago during the Dark War, meaning that she is what's known as a Chronophantasma, which is short for shouldn't exist. Ragna picks a fight with some random dude before getting arrested by a high-ranking NOL officer, Kagura Mutsuki. Kagura is working with Kokonoe to orchestrate a rebellion to force Itsunami out of power, and offers Ragna some intel on Kushinada's linchpin in exchange for his participation in a plan known as the Battle of Ragna the Blood Edge, a plan that has nothing to do with Itsunami, so we're not gonna talk about it. After a near-death experience, Ragna vows to never use the Azure Grimoire ever again. But then Rachel's all like, Ragna, you're a fucking pussy-ass bitch, and to prove it, I am now going to send you back in time. You're gonna do fucking, what? See ya. Ragna is suddenly transported all the way back to the Dark War, arriving at the very moment in the beginning of the story where Celica is running away from home in search of her father. Jesus fucking Christ. Ragna lands in a forest where he meets Celica for the first time for the second time, not recognizing her because he's got amnesia. Selective amnesia, given that he remembers Rachel, his siblings, and the entire history of the Dark War, but amnesia nonetheless. Ragna decides to help Celica in her journey to find her father. They do find him, but he dies, so he's not important. The real juice is that they find Kushinada's linchpin, which is capable of killing the Black Beast and ending the Dark War at the small price of killing Celica. Yeah, no thanks. So Ragna comes up with a better plan. He's going to, and this is not a joke, run directly into the Black Beast and see what happens. This fucking works, and the Black Beast disappears for a year. In that time, the 6 heroes were assembled, consisting of 9, Trinity Glassfill, Jubei, Valkenhayn, and fucking Terumi for some reason, all of whom were led by Hakumen, who is actually a version of Jin Kisaragi from 100 years in the future, from one of the timelines where Jin stupidly jumped into the Kagutsuchi Cauldron. In the final battle of the Dark War, the 6 heroes mercilessly attack the outer body of the Black Beast, while Celica goes inside and helps Ragna kill its heart, which is actually New 13 again. Don't ask. Once the heart is thoroughly killed, Rachel flies in to teleport Ragna back to his own time while Celica gets to safety and watches Hakumen deal the final blow to the Black Beast. Celica would go on to build a church where she would raise 3 children named Ragna, Jin, and Saya. Huh, what a coincidence. While 9 and Jubei get married and have a daughter together. That daughter turns out to be Kokonoe, but 9 wouldn't get to raise her on account of the fact that she was thrown into the boundary alongside Trinity and Hakumen thanks to Terumi. Anyways, back to the present day, it actually turns out that Kokonoe was the one who brought Celica into their time period for the sole purpose of killing her to activate Kushinada's linchpin to kill Itsunami, which Ragna sees as ethically problematic. Apparently complications with being a Chronophantasma means that Celica is just gonna die soon anyways, but Rachel steps in to explain that there's another way to activate the linchpin, the Nox Nectoris Phoenix Retenjo, which is currently in the possession of Bang Shishigami. Ragna, Noelle, and Celica meet with Bang to activate the linchpin, but are stopped by Relius Clover while Itsunami announces to the world that she is now proceeding with the whole killing everyone plan. Oh my fucking god, just do it already! Hazama and New 13 activate the Tower of Ibukido to bring about the Nemesis Horizon, the gate by which Amaterasu gracefully descends into the mortal realm, and Itsunami summons Take Mikazuchi as the means to finally kill it. Ragna, Noelle, and Jin are teleported in front of Take Mikazuchi, and they hold it off as Bang Shishigami nails the Retenjo into Kushinada's linchpin, plunging it directly into the Tower of Ibukido and weakening Take Mikazuchi enough for Ragna to utilize the Azure Grimoire to defeat it once and for all. In the aftermath, however, shit hits the fan because Ragna gets stabbed again by New 13 and Itsunami forces the Azure Grimoire to go berserk. She then turns Take Mikazuchi into a black sphere called the Embryo, leading directly into BlazBlue Central Fiction. Everyone is looking at the Embryo all like, what the fuck is that thing? And soon enough, Noelle and Rachel are teleported in front of it. Noelle looks at it, some weird shit happens, and now all of a sudden Ragna is outside of Kagutsuchi again. We have now gone back in time to the beginning of BlazBlue Calamitytrigger, where Ragna the Blood Edge is known as the Grim Reaper and has the highest bounty ever placed on his capture. Except for we didn't actually go back in time at all, rather, the events of Calamitytrigger in the past were duplicated and then pasted onto the present. Also, Ragna's got amnesia again. Ragna wanders around, saves Noelle, then gets arrested by Kagura. Unfortunately, the guards forgot to take away his sword, so he breaks out of prison and heads to the Kagutsuchi Cauldron to meet with New 13 once again. This time, to save her, whatever that means. Just then, he is teleported to the location of 9 the Phantom, who is recovered from the boundary at some point and tells Ragna along with the rest of the BlazBlue cast that in order to obtain the Azure and make their dreams come true, they must defeat Itsunami before the world ends. Which was kind of obvious, but thanks for the heads up, I guess. Phenomenon intervention again, everyone is an Ikaraga now, which is just as confusing as it sounds. Most of the characters at this point are suspicious that events thus far have been a little off, and this is because the BlazBlue cast is actually inside of the Embryo, which is a false version of the real world created by the Origin. Yeah, that thing from the beginning of the video. And the real world itself has been deleted. Everyone who is in the Embryo is considered a chosen one with a strong enough soul to kill Itsunami and obtain the Azure. Except for not actually, because Ragna finds out that even if they defeat Itsunami, not only is everyone gonna die anyway, but every possibility ever will cease to exist. So Ragna comes up with a plan. He's going to devour the dreams of all the chosen ones, obtain the Azure, and then make everyone everyone's dreams come true by turning himself into a new possibility using Amaterasu, which will cause him to forfeit his existence as an individual as foretold by Amane Nishiki, who is basically the world's replacement for Rachel after she lost her power. Ragna starts stealing everyone's dreams, the only problem being that the Azure Grimoire is literally trying to eat him alive, so Rachel convinces Kokonoe and Kagura to help him out. Before they can though, they need to deal with Nine the Phantom, who apparently built her own personal god to challenge Amaterasu. They infiltrate Nine's workshop and learn from her that the world is a product of the Origin's dream, which is called the Central Fiction, and if her dream reaches an unsatisfactory conclusion, then she endlessly loops the world over and over again. This is why Nine built her own god, called Requiem, to kill Amaterasu, end the world, and replace it with a better one. Everyone would rather the world not end, so Ragna beats the shit out of Nine. As Nine is dying, Itsunami barges in and tries to ruin everything, but Nine, with her last bit of strength, enacts one more phenomenon intervention and activates Requiem, telling Ragna that he's got 1 week to figure out how to save the world. He is then inexplicably teleported to his childhood home, which doesn't make any sense because if you recall, that shit burned down. Regardless, it's here that Noelle starts revealing some major truth, that she contains a portion of the soul of the Origin, which is also Ragna's little sister, Saya. In fact, the same is true for Lambda 11, Mu 12, Nu 13, and Itsunami, and it's at this point where you realize that half the characters in this game are the same fucking person. After chilling out at the church for a few days, the squad is finally able to be teleported back to Ikaraga. But just before they do, Celica, existing in a time where she shouldn't, says goodbye to Ragna and his friends, and fades away to nothing. Anyway, so Requiem is about to blow up, and the explosion will be so huge that at best it destroys the world. This whole time, Celica was being protected by an automaton called Minerva, which is apparently just a walking nuclear bomb, so Kokonoe is going to detonate Minerva at the same time that Requiem explodes so that the forces of the two explosions cancel each other out. Just before that happens though, Noelle fuses her soul with Itsunami, and Ragna manages to steal her dream in the process, finally getting rid of Itsunami for good. Bad news though, the world is now ending, and characters are disappearing into nothingness left and right. Even worse, Yuki Terumi fuses himself with Hakumen to regain his ultimate form as the Susanoo unit, and he kidnaps Noelle to take her to the Forbidden Gate, the door to the Azure that only Noelle can open. Ragna, Jin, and the spirit of Trinity Glassville, yeah, she's here too, don't worry about it, head inside the Kagutsuchi Cauldron to find the gate to the Azure, where Terumi, aka Susanoo, is waiting for them. Ragna manages to pull Terumi out of the Susanoo unit, and Trinity transfers Jin into the armor so that he can cut down both Terumi and Ragna. Soon enough, Ragna and Terumi both find themselves in front of the Azure, the two of them having the strongest desire for it over anyone else. Terumi finally reveals his ultimate goal, to utilize the power of the Azure to create a world of only pain, hate, and suffering. With failure not an option, Ragna draws his blade.
The wheel of fate is turning. Rebel 1. Action!
With Terumi finally defeated, the path to the Azure has no more obstructions. The Amaterasu unit reveals itself alongside Noelle, and Noelle finally becomes one with the Origin. She is also naked. I don't think that was necessary. Trinity removes Jin from the Susanoo unit and hides it deep within the boundary where no human will ever obtain it again. This leaves one final job for Ragna. It turns out that the looping dream of the Origin centers around a single person, and the moment that this person dies is the moment that the world loops again. That someone is, of course, Ragna the Blood Edge. Ragna is the central fiction. So long as Ragna exists, the looping nightmare will never end. So Ragna walks up to the Amaterasu unit and tells it to erase all memories of him from the world, thus putting an end to his own existence and allowing the world to continue without interruption forevermore. The last shot we see is of Rachel standing above Ragna's grave, who at this point she doesn't even remember anymore. But what she does know is that the grave is proof of a world that she cared about very deeply, even though its plot was barely comprehensible and had way too many egotistical motherfuckers who wanted to destroy the world. But somehow she survived through all of it, and in the end, we leave off with her vowing to search for the man who saved everyone. And with that, the story of BlazBlue comes to an end. I'm going back to Guilty Gear.